cases of prophecies are astrological signs, and yet, in spite of our goodwill, we shall not be free from reproach. The obstinate skeptics will always look upon us as visionaries, and our scientific progressives will call us laggards. We have given our answer to the former. The latter will allow us to wait before popularizing their methods until these become more perfected and consequently clearer, therefore simplified. For the more an art or a science progresses, the more simple it becomes. In this book we will keep to an astrology whose modernized tradition is full of prophecies which became true. One of the best known of these is that of Pierre Dailly, who predicted the French Revolution some 350 years before it broke out. The centuries of Nostradamus comprise several centuries, and his predictions for the most part came true. We find one of the most remarkable horoscopic successes marred, it is true, by a Hindoo in the Memoirs of Lord F. Published by the Century Review, and quoted by Luke Ryan in his Astrology Unveiled. F. His father, so he tells us, was the younger son of an exceedingly rich English family, but owing to the law of primogeniture, he himself was Po. At the beginning of the 18th century, he was lieutenant in command of an outpost in the Punjab, India. One evening his scouts brought in a Hindoo who said he lived in a distant sanctuary, the priests of which practiced astrology. As this man did not seem to be very suspect, the lieutenant was on the point of letting him go, when a sudden thought occurred to him, offered him his liberty in exchange for a horoscope. The Brahmin begged him to be careful, saying that it was dangerous to pry into the sacred mysteries. The companions of the officer, much impressed, did not ask to know their fate. F. His father alone insisted. He gave the date of his birth, and the Hindoo, having consulted the sky and mentally drawn up the horoscope, answered after a long pause in a solemn voice, "You desired to know. Listen. Yet 10 revolutions of the sun and 3 revolutions of the moon, and you will be rich and a lord. You will rise to fortune on a ladder made of 11 cupses. Yet 3 more revolutions of the sun and 2 revolutions of the moon and silk will cause your death. The stars have spoken." F. smiled and let the Hindoo go. But soon he heard of the death of the head of his house, an English peer, then, having left India, of the death of the 11 members who within 10 years and 3 months left him heir to the title and fortune of his brothers. Remembering the prophecy, the first part of which had been so strangely fulfilled, he forbade the use of all silk in his castle. But when fresh troubles broke out in India, he rejoined the service. He had barely reached his post when the well-known revolt of the thugs broke out, and he was strangled, in accordance with the custom of these rebels, with a silken cord. And this happened 13 years and 5 months after the adventure in the Punjab. Next let us extract from an old number of the Gaulois the following paragraph, which appeared shortly after the death of the celebrated occultist Stanislas Gual, to the sale of the library of the very distinguished occultist. The Marquis Guaita, a fervent Catholic, has once more brought to the fore those old books of prophecies of which he had collected such extraordinary examples. Their number is incredible, and in almost all of them there are gleanings for the plain man as well as for the better informed. When we consider, for instance, from the time of the Revolution down to the excitements of the present day, the events of the century in their connection with the prophecies of seers of all times and of all countries, we are struck by their coincidence with historic truth. From 1781 to our own time, there is not one fact of real importance which has not been foretold, long years before its occurrence, by the most celebrated among the seers. The horrors of the Revolution, the coming of Bonaparte, his unexpected good fortune, his pride and his reverse, the campaign in Russia, 1814, 1815, the entrance of the Allies into Paris, the restoration of the French royal family, the fall of the Bourbons and Louis Philippe, the Coke taking the place of the Lily, the reign of what some call plutocracy, the Revolution of 1848, Napoleon III, the Crimean War, the disasters of 1870 have been foretold in language so precise, so striking and so clear that we rightly remain amazed. No other epoch has ever seen such a harvest of prophets and seers as ours. And, without speaking of Mile Cusda nor of the visionaries whose truthfulness has not been definitely proved, is it necessary to refer to the prophetic voices of the ABB Forcuric, the predictions of Father Necton, those of the nun Belly, of the Trappist of Orthez, of the Abbé Suffirant, of the seer of Owell, the announcements of Mgr. Do and Lo, the last word of the prophecies of Turek, the predictions of Melanie Calvert, of Marie Lataste, of the ecstatic of Boulierist, and so many others who are found every day. Among all these visions of the future, two are specially revered by the lovers of occult matters. The well-known prediction of Orville and the prophecy of Primorlo, their universal fame as much to the clearness and the certainty of their statements as to their indisputable authenticity, since they have been found as far away as India. Let us add to these 2 or 3 known facts relating to the phenomenon of prediction. The astrologer Bishop Luke Garrick, so says the Princess of Cleves, had foretold to Henry II that he would be killed in a duel. To the Jude Guise that he would be murdered. To a certain M. Escos that he would have his head broken by the kick of a horse. It is well known that he was not mistaken. Cazot, author of The Devil in Love, and W. Ho, also W.R. as an initiate, being one evening at the house of Champfort, shortly before the Revolution, which was already being talked of, foretold to Condorcet that he would die in prison by poisoning himself. To Champfort, that he would cut his veins by 22 cuts with the razor. To Vic Darzier, that he would die of an attack of gout. To Nicolai and Bailey, that they would go to the scaffold. To the Duchess Grammont, that she too would go into the fatal cart. All these suffered the unhappy lot foretold them by this seer academician in 1786. Oliverius, surgeon and theologian, published in 1542 a book of prophecies in which we find, written beforehand, a biography which corresponds almost item by item with Napoleon I. In 1550 appeared the Book of the Condition and Mutation of the Times, by Richard Roussat, Canon of Langres, and we find this description of it made recently by a bookseller in his catalogue, where he values it at the tidy sum of 2,000 francs. Among the curiosities of this work, we find the remarkable prophecy in which the French Revolution is announced in a very definite manner. In the paragraph page 162 which we reproduce below, the dates 1789 and 1814 are indicated in full words. Let us leave and put an end to speaking of things completed and which are done daily, which almost all men know and are aware of unless they are stupid and idiots. And now let us change our subject and come to speak of the great and marvelous conjunction which the astrologers tell us is to come about the years of our Lord 1789, and about 25 years later 1814. Having considered and calculated all these things, the said astrologers conclude that if the world endures until such and such a time which to God alone is known, very great mutations and alterations will take place in this universal world, even unto the religions and the laws. Of course, all these prophecies which we relate at this moment are not particularly astrological, and many are phenomena of voyance of which we shall have to speak again. But we hope to be forgiven if we encroach in these anecdotes on later chapters, which themselves are not deprived of them. It may also be thought to be not out of place, on the very threshold of a book dealing mainly with the divinatory sciences, to give typical examples of various divinatines which themselves prove that, whencesoever they may proceed from the reading of the skies, the hand, the cods, etc., they form an important whole of mysterious facts well worth study. This is why we allow ourselves to recall here the recent and disconcerting stories which went the round at the time of the excavations carried out in the Valley of Kings, in Egypt. It is well known that the violation of the tomb of Tutankhamun was followed by the somewhat early and somewhat strange death of several of those who were responsible for it. Soon after, another death caused surprise in the world of literature, the death, in the East, of the journalist Endyar, not so much on account of the death itself, at which his friends were not much astonished, for they knew that their colleague was consumptive, as on account of the report thereof given by the president of the press syndicate of Cochinchina, which follows. While I was trying, writes M. La Chevrotti Poundre, to comfort him, while I attempted to make him believe that the end was not near, he shook his head and told me the following prophecy. Friend, I am a marked manual. There are holy places which it is not right to violate. An eminent traveler took into a holy temple at Angkor and Impia Sax. A bonze foretold his death. He was, as you know, murdered. The Governor-General Long, Northcliffe, and I, we also violated, with the impiousness of inquisitive tourists, a temple hidden in the woods, of which a Buddhist priest wanted to bar us the entry. This bonze put a curse on us and told us in his imprecations that before 5 years had elapsed we should all three be removed from the number of the living. Northcliffe was the first to die. Maurice Long fell on the journey, at Colombo. I alone am left. This is the 4th year. I feel the prediction of the bonze weighing down my fate. Endyar fortunes lies there, dead. The prophecy has come true. We have here a prophecy by curse and not by astrology, so be it. We shall see later what magic thinks of it and how it explains it. Still, it is a prophecy, like many thousand others. And we wanted to begin by quoting some before plunging into the heart of our subject. It is of course understood that we shall not base our faith on anecdotes of this kind, although it would be possible to multiply them. Such exactness in the knowledge of the future remains somewhat fantastic, but more within our reach and more easily checked are horoscopic statements relating to this or that person whom we know. It is in this realm convenient for our examination that we can and must draw up our tables of nativities. We shall presently show how. 50 to the occult sciences, and here also we have the support of modern scholars, as is shown by this fragment of an interview given to our colleague André Onivelde by the celebrated F. Bollet, who died in 1922. Apart from the study of the Kabbalah, of religions and their symbols, the only concrete science to which M.F. Ch. Bollet devoted himself is astrology. In this realm he is looked upon as a master, and the work which forms the result of his researches is law. As I ask him for a few definite details, he gives me a large mass of cases in which the future was described to him with certainty by means of astrological tables. He helped in the cure of children, whose coming illnesses he had seen. During the war he was able to put on their guard soldiers and officers whom he knew or who were described to him, by warning them of the day and the hour when they would take part in the attack, and what precautions they would be able to take. When the events did not bear out the tables, there was yet always a part of truth in what the latter had foretold. Thus Bartlett several times during the war read in the stars the end of the war, and if at the date given the war did not end, still it became known subsequently that these dates had always coincided with attempts or proposals for peace. Astrology, continued M. Bartlett, is the great providential guide which, by warning us, or by showing to us what we should not have known of ourselves, enables us to correct. The more we perfect ourselves, the more we escape from astrology, that is to say, fate. Yet it is the great teacher. It is the proof that there is something which governs humanity. It leads man towards an immortal realization of the absolute looked upon as an inexhaustible power which manifests itself progressively. A good astrological exercise will be the construction of the horoscope of great men whose qualities, defects and career are known to us. We shall thus have excellent tests. For instance, the horoscope of Gamma Hut, the sinister murderer, has been drawn up. Criminal leanings abounded in it. Mercury in Scorpio, Mars and the Moon joined in house and in addition equated with Saturn. Saturn twice, joined with Jupiter and Mercury in house 6, which means condemnation, imprisonment, violent death. Proof of low instinct likewise abounds in the astrological table of Pranzini. We do not set it out in detail, especially because the expressions used will for the moment seem to you sibylline, although presently they will become clear. But we may add that, drawn up again and again by qualified astrologers, at the other end of the appalling one, we could not be more up to date than by pointing out that at the last Congress of Experimental Psychology, the President, after having again replied to all the objections raised against astrology, showed the scientific and social utility of such study. Its great utility, he said, is that by showing us our qualities, flaws and defects, and the conjunctions in which the subject will probably find himself, it enables us to correct the defects, eradicate the flaws, foresee the events, and to ward them off before they have become real. The horoscopes above mentioned, that of Victor Hugo is truly magnificent, that of Napoleon most remarkable with its double prediction of rise and fall. A young pupil of Professor Thenome, Bawdy one day during one of the lectures of this learned and charming woman at the lecture hall of the Learned Societies, drew the horoscope of Pierre Loti illustrated on the blackboard. The fascinated students recognized item by item in the celestial signs the beautiful and melancholy trial adventure of this great writer. Farther on we shall find a fairly simple method of recognizing without recourse to the horoscope, by means of planetary typology, the main influences of the stars on a human being. But it is time we reached the practical object of our chapter of Principles of Astrology and their application. First, however, it is necessary to give the table of the signs generally used in astrology, at least those representing the 7 planets and the 12 constellations of the zodiac. Here they are, together with an explanation resembling that given in the human cosmogony of Eli Alter, who says they are derived from the configuration of the zodiac 1-1. The sun is represented by a circle showing traces of the human face, but simplified by a dot in the center, symbol of the infinite and of the figure 10. 2. Saturn means time. Remember mythology represented by a cross and the 4 quarters of the circle, symbolic of duration, the finite within the infinite. It is therefore pictured by a cross with one of the quarters of the circle, or sometimes 2 opposite quarters. 3. The moon is pictured by a crescent, playing without any further explanation. 4. Mars is a ray shooting forth from the sun, like an arrow of heat. 5. Venus has for its sign a cross surmounted by a circle. It is in short the sign of time placed under that of the sun, for Venus is solar fertility, but dependent on duration. 6. Mercury has for sign that of Venus surmounted by a lunar crescent, sometimes by 2 quarters of the circle, which perhaps are symbolic of wings as in mythology, Mercury being the intermediary between the 4 elements and the phenomena produced by them. 7. Jupiter is more complicated. There are 3 suns, symbolic of earthly fire maintained by heavenly fire and rising out of the waters under the form of steam, fire ether, which falls back as beneficent rain. These 3 suns are united by lines forming a kind of 4, which explains the hieroglyphic simplification which has been made of it. 1 which theoretically is a circle divided into 4 by the seasons. Table of the planets, their complete configuration, and the simplified sign which represents them. As to the 12 signs of the zodiac, here is their configuration, beginning with the ram, the first of the astrological year, start of spring. 1. The ram is represented by a ram's head, but simplified into a figure forming a horizontal 3, symbol of beginning fertility, the head of the starry flock. 2. Taurus, in principle a bull's head, also simplified into an 8, open at the top. 3. Gemini, 2 children joined, simplified into a capital H. 4. Cancer, or the crab, is represented by 2 horizontal 9s, joined or disjoined. 5. Leo, the symbol of the sun followed by a tail, symbolic, says Alter, of the spermatozoid, the principles of reproduction, the central fire of the earth, maturity, the vital force. Simplified, the sign is a sort of capital M. 7. Libra, middle sign of the zodiac, symbol of equilibrium, a simplified scale. 8. Scorpio, under the emblem of lightning ending in a dart of scorpion's tail. 9. Sagittarius, a man drawing a bow, simplification, an arrow. 10. Capricorn, Alter sees in it the signs of Saturn, Jupiter and Mars joined into one, forming 3 crescents connected. 11. Aquarius, 2 wavy lines symbolic of the regular running of liquids or fluids. 12. Pisces, 2 fishes joined into a sign, differing from, though resembling, that of Gemini. We do not intend to lose our way among the long explanations given by various authors of these symbolic signs. Besides, later pages will clear up what may be left dark in this summary for those who are not initiated into the mysteries, symbols and analogies with which astrology abounds.